Hello, Kay. Thank you for being here with us for Governance Insights. So we are here to just have a conversation on diversity and inclusion. You have been passionate about studying diversity, inclusion, and performance over many years. Now, can you tell us how the focus on diversity has changed over the last 50 years?
When one casts one mind back to the 1960s and really traverses over the next 50 years, there have been about 5 themes that really are apparent in diversity and inclusion. In the 1960s, the first one was really legal in response to legislation which highlighted to employers that they may not discriminate on the basis of creed or age or ethnicity. There was a lot of focus in terms of compliance not coming into lawsuits. So that's what I call the legal phase. The second phase was really in response to, well, now we're getting employees in, we're not discriminating, but how do we make employees feel at home? And we had a plethora of work around inclusion. How do you welcome and make to feel at home? And it's still occurring now. The third theme was a response to really a business theme is, you know, if my engineers and my leaders take diversity seriously because there's a business benefit, then maybe we'll have more seriousness. And that is what I call the business case theme. And then, and we're really in the throes of it now, comes a phase that we call unconscious bias, implicit bias. It's about how do I ensure that, albeit morally and legally, I'm welcoming talent? How do I ensure that I do not prejudice talent because of stereotypes? And the last and not least theme is about what we call survival, where leaders understand that diversity is not a nice to have, but that within a digital age, they're going to have to draw and retain diverse talent to survive.
Great. So when you work with organizations, where do you see most attention being placed on diversity initiatives?
So what we see is globally that there are themes, very much like the 5 themes that I've just mentioned. But you know, Sonia, it is so contextual. So for example, if you look at the United States, there's been a lot of focus in terms of gender diversity and race diversity, really on the demographic area. If you cast your eyes now to Europe in a response to quotas, they are looking very much at gender. But for example, Sweden is a lot further than, say, for example, the Netherlands. And more, you will be seeing that there is an industry impact. So for example, in technology, there's a lot of focus in terms of gender and generational diversity in technology companies, which is somewhat different, say, to the legal profession.
You refer to 4 typologies that characterize, in a way, diversity initiatives in organization. So can you share with us more on these typologies? Can you tell us more the characteristics?
Absolutely. You know, over the last 30 years, as I've been researching and collaborating, what you see is the initiatives that we were talking about seem to be quite plotted to a context of a client and organization. So let me describe the topologies on 2 dimensions. The one is the extent to which diversity is regarded as very strategic or more operational. And on the other dimension is the extent to which it is really geared around compliance or around people. So let me start on that dimension. The first topology of the 4 is what we call the checklist or compliance. These are the companies that are very focused on metrics, reporting, being responsive to legislation that is coming. And so it is quite hard, and you might be missing a little bit the heart of the inclusion in the people. So that is the checklist topology. On the other side is what we call the soft or the people topology. These are the companies that really are focused on inclusion, on community, on engagement, but perhaps they're not rigorous enough in terms of why they're doing this. What are the business benefits? What are the compliance metrics? Now, on the other dimension, which is the strategic to operational, you have the third topology, which we call the visionary. These are the companies where you have the CEO, the board, really being on the platform saying this is important, but it is a little bit in terms of oil on water. It is not actually percolating into the organization itself. You don't see the protocols, the rituals that make it very relevant in terms of day-to-day life in the organization. And last but not least, and we see this so often, is what we call the fourth topology, the flavor of the month. It is where you are missing the strategic anchoring, and you have people within the organization, a little bit like skunk works, working on diversity and inclusion, but it doesn't bubble to the strategic surface.
Yes, so which typology would you consider most important, given the explanations you have given with us?
So this is what's so interesting. There isn't any one topology. The research has actually shown that an organization needs to be choosing all four battlegrounds. Now, clearly, within the master plan of diversity and inclusion, you can say, perhaps I need to have more of a strategic focus now versus the compliance focus. But what you need to do is ensuring that there's a strategic focus of diversity, that you are measuring it, and that there is a compliance, that you're not losing sight of the heart and engagement of people, and that it is being instilled in the bowels of the organization and operationalized.
Sure. And then when managing the different typologies, how can an integrated approach be achieved?
So as we spoke about it, we need to, in fact, have the battlegrounds of all the topologies. And in order to do it in an integrated way, we have created really an approach called the integrated diversity model. And it creates and is built around 8 steps. The first one is that you need to have a transformational context. Where are we going as an organization, and what is the role of diversity into that? Secondly, having stated that, the second step is to say, to what degree do we need to have inclusion and collaboration? There are some industries that need it more than others. The third step is to say, so if we need that diversity, is there anything in terms of unconscious bias that prohibits us getting that diversity? So we call it about understanding the implicit bias in the organization. We then go to the fourth step, which is how do we make the business case of having diversity relevant for our company so that you could actually vocate it outwards and people understand it. We then go to the fifth one, which is talking about what are the behaviors of inclusive leadership and the values, for example, reverse mentoring, sponsorship. We then go to the sixth one, which is what are the protocols and the rituals that we need to have in place to operationalize it, and how do we make sure that these are unbiased? You then go to the seventh one, which talks about, so how do we measure it? And it is not just about measuring demographics. It's measuring it more richly in terms of the demographics plus the engagement plus the leadership profile that you have. And last but not least, and the eighth step, is how do we celebrate and maintain and sustain our focus on united diversity?
So with all this case, so what's the role of the board? What's the role of the chairman into having this integrated approach for diversity inclusion? What's your perspective on this?
I'm so thankful for the question because I cannot underestimate the role of boards as the highest decision-making authority in a company, in an organization. It creates not only a symbolic but an absolute critical decision-making role. And in fact, in every single function of the board, whether it's the strategic or the integrated risk management or the decision-making or the eye of people, is the role in terms of diversity and inclusion. The board needs not only to replicate and emanate inclusive diversity at the board level, and that the chair of the board needs to ensure that there is inclusive diversity at the board level, but also there needs to be a discussion and a debate that occurs with the CEO in terms of what is the role of diversity in the organization, what are the investments that are being made, are we actually grooming leaders to be inclusive leaders, are we having a master plan in place to be managing the risk. So the role of the board is so important.
Well, thank you very much, Kay. This is very insightful. Thank you for being here with us. It's a delight to have you.
And it's lovely to have been here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.